This week on The Record, Congress compromises.
The bill is passed.
D.C. averts default, at least for now. What's at stake in the debt ceiling debate and what it could cost you. Congresswoman Cori Bush, former Congressman Rodney Davis, Senator Josh Hawley are all on the record. Plus, Missouri House Democrat Sarah Unsicker mounts her bid for Attorney General. She joins us live on the record. And the Assistant Majority Leader from the Illinois House, Democrat Jay Hoffman, is live on the record to recap what's in the new Illinois budget. It's all coming up right now. Welcome to The Record. I'm Mark Maxwell. We have a deal in D.C. Congress compromises on the debt ceiling negotiations. President Biden cutting a deal with House Speaker Kevin McCarthy to cut spending by $2.1 trillion in the fiscal year, but lift the debt ceiling altogether, removing it and putting that off until after the 2024 presidential election. Let's check the record. 149 Republicans voted with 165 Democrats to pass this proposal with a wide bipartisan majority in the House. 71 Republicans voted against it, saying the cuts weren't deep enough. 46 Democrats voted no, arguing it didn't raise taxes on the rich or it jeopardized food stamp benefits for hungry poor people. How did our local members of Congress vote? You can see here on the screen Democrat Nikki Budzinski voting yes, along with 3 Missouri Republicans, Ann Wagner, Jason Smith, and Blaine Luetkemeyer. St. Louis Democrat Cori Bush voting no, along with far-right Republican Mary Miller and Mike Bost. Bush opposed the work requirements for food stamps, but told CNN yesterday she still sees some good in the final package.
It's a bad deal. I've said it multiple times. I have to say that I do applaud the President Biden and the administration for what they were able to do. But this is how I see it in my head. It's like a person being given marbles to build a house. This is what you have to build a house with, so this is all you have to work with. So make the best of what you can, what you can do with it. That's what this seems to be to me. But what we're doing is we're exchanging one vulnerable community for the next.
Former Illinois Congressman Rodney Davis is live at the Capitol Rotunda. He's now joining us on the record. Congressman, progressives didn't like this debt ceiling deal. The far right didn't like it, but the vote wasn't really close. It passed with 96 votes to spare. So take us behind the scenes, at least as much as you can from your vantage point. How did it all come together?
It came together because Kevin McCarthy and his leadership team, along with Garrett Graves, Patrick McHenry, and French Hill, they decided that they were going to do what they could to get a bill passed through the House and allow leverage for Republicans for once to be able to go negotiate what I thought was a great deal. I mean, this should be viewed as a huge bipartisan success as to what Washington looks like when Washington works. But instead, a lot of the scuttlebutt after last night in the House vote is focused on those who would never vote for any debt ceiling bill, and that's the far left and the far right.
How much credit do you give President Biden for what you just said was, quote, allowing that leverage? How do you grade his ability to land the deal?
Look, I got to give him and his team credit for, after saying that they would not negotiate, coming to the table and doing what is right for the American people. Speaker McCarthy and his team did not take an antagonistic approach. They took an approach that was a precision-like approach. They went in and said, where can we find a deal? Here are our red lines. What are your red lines? And in the end, they came up with a deal that is one of the most fiscally conservative pieces of legislation that I've ever seen in my 26 years as a staffer and a member of Congress.
Republicans have a very narrow majority, as you know, in the House, and 71 GOP members voted against this thing, some of them even calling for overthrowing Speaker McCarthy during the hottest moments of the negotiations. Give us your sense of the fractures or divisions in the Republican conference right now. Is Kevin McCarthy weaker or stronger after pushing for this deal?
Oh, he's much stronger. I mean, look at the bipartisan deal that went through with an overwhelming number of Republicans. A majority of Republicans in the House voted for this bill. Majority of Democrats in the House voted for this bill. This is a bipartisan success story that finally got Democrats in Washington to realize that they can't keep spending like they have been and exacerbating inflationary pressures. This is a $2.1+ trillion savings over 10 years. The CBO said it's going to save more money than even the negotiators initially imagined.
And yet, no Illinois members of Congress, no Illinois Republican members of Congress voted for it. I want to read to you what Congressman Mike Bost said earlier this year.
Now we have to look at the debt ceiling. So understand this, a responsible thing is that you're going to have to increase the debt ceiling. But you don't be so irresponsible that you don't put some kind of ties that will stop us from doing what they did in those two bills. Okay? So I don't know which way I'm going to vote, but I know I can't let the good faith of the American government go by the wayside, but I've got to figure out something to try to control their spending.
Congressman Bost voted against it. What happened?
Well, I don't know. I haven't talked to Mike about it, but I'm sure he had his reasons. And in the end, though, this bill passed with an overwhelming number of Republicans and Democrats. And that's what should be focused on. Every single member, regardless of who they are, where they represent, and the factions of Republicans and Democrats that they represent, they're going to have their reasons, and those are questions you need to ask them directly, because I will never put words into their mouth. But this bill, I think, was the epitome of what is right about Washington, D.C. And I give Kevin McCarthy, the Republican leadership team, credit, his team of negotiators, and also President Biden and his team of negotiators. It worked. The American people should be happy, and ask individual members why they voted a certain way, not just assuming that that should be the conversation right now.
We know that Mike Bost may face a primary from a far-right candidate, Darren Bailey, who lost his race for governor. You faced a primary challenge in the last cycle from Mary Miller, who's closely aligned with Darren Bailey there. What's at stake in the Bost race, and did you ever feel that kind of pressure when you were a sitting member to vote in a way that might not make you more vulnerable in a primary?
I mean, you feel that pressure even in a former district like I had, which was a 50-50 district. I mean, the far right and the far left are going to try to pressure you no matter where they live and what type of district that you have. In the end, I know I lost my primary because I lost the support of former President Trump. It's a brand new district, didn't know me, and they trusted President Trump over what I was telling them I was going to do for them. In the end, Mike Bost is going to beat back any primary challenge that he can. Darren Bailey was one of the worst gubernatorial candidates that Illinois has ever seen. This is somebody who said he was going to increase turnout in downstate Illinois that has become solidly Republican, and the facts show that did not happen. Darren Bailey lives in an echo chamber and needs to understand that Illinois doesn't need someone like that. And Mike Bost is doing a great job as a member of Congress. He's protecting our veterans. He's chairing our Veterans Affairs Committee. This is somebody who has done the job, who is conservative, who will have the support of former President Trump. This is not a race Darren Bailey should get into unless he wants to be disappointed again like he was in November of 2022.
His team would say he's undefeated in Republican primaries, and that's different than a general election, but I see your point. I guess we'll have some time to sort that out.
Well, you can win as many primary victories as you want. If you don't win the general, it doesn't really matter because you give that seat to a Democrat, just like he did in November of 2022, and Illinois is paying the price for it.
All right, Congressman Rodney Davis, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Hello, Mark.
Hey, Senator, Congresswoman Ann Wagner is selling a lot of positive things that she sees in this debt ceiling deal, closing loopholes, increasing work requirements to get able-bodied Americans back into the workforce, goes on, boosting defense spending. Do you see anything good in this debt ceiling deal?
Yeah, I like the workforce requirements. I think that's good in terms of the work requirements, I should say, and not workforce. But yeah, the basic work requirements I think are a good thing. But I'm going to be a no on this thing, Mark, and the reason is it doesn't do anything to close our trade deficit with China. Every dollar of that trade deficit represents jobs lost in Missouri. We've lost 60,000 jobs to China, blue-collar jobs now, in the last 2 decades, 4 million nationwide. We need to bring those jobs back. We need industry back in our state and in our country. And I think this is a missed opportunity to deal with what I think is maybe our greatest economic challenge, which is blue-collar workers, productive industry in the United States of America.
I'm going to push back on that a little bit because doesn't it actually expand and open up some American energy independence and sort of green light some of those projects? Wouldn't that be one way to increase competitiveness with China?
I'm all for the pipeline. I think that's great. I think the pipeline's good, although it doesn't do anything to reverse the core of Joe Biden's energy policy, which is to shut down American energy production and make us more dependent on China. I just came from an Energy Committee hearing where we were hearing testimony about our increasing reliance on Chinese batteries and Chinese solar panels, which are made with slave labor, by the way, and Chinese energy components. I mean, this is not sustainable. It represents jobs and production lost in this country. And I just think you can't argue with the statistics. 2 decades, 4 million jobs lost to China, and our trade deficit just gets larger and larger and larger. So listen, I'm probably an outlier in my party on this issue because I think the most important deficit we face is the trade deficit with China. I think the most important thing we should be doing is focusing on blue-collar jobs and manufacturing and production in the United States of America. And I just think that this agreement, it's got some good parts, but I just think it's a missed opportunity in that respect. So I'm going to vote no.
The trade deficit is no doubt a serious issue. I just wonder what the shape of that deal might look like in your eyes. There's often that phrase, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. You've just said there's some good things in here. How much closer would you have to get to close the trade deficit to finally swing over to a yes?
Well, you'd have to do something on the trade deficit. This deal does nothing. And here's what I would say, Mark. I put a proposal out there. I think that we ought to put tariffs on China every year that we don't have a zero trade deficit. I propose legislation that would automatically level 25% across the board tariffs on Chinese industry until we get our trade deficit to zero. That's the kind of get tough, get serious policy that we need. That would send a message to the Chinese government that we're not going to let them steal our stuff. But it would also send a message to American industry, frankly, that America is worth investing in. We need American companies to quit sending jobs and production overseas, quit using slave labor overseas, start investing in America. And we can do it if we're serious about it. But right now, people aren't serious about it. Not in Washington. They're serious about it in Missouri, but not in Washington.
I can't imagine that the U.S. defaulting on its debt for the first time in history would improve America's leverage with China. I wonder if you might just have the luxury of saying you're going to vote no, because perhaps the votes are there that this deal is going to go through. I'm going to ask a clearly hypothetical question, but if the last vote, the deciding vote, came down to you, would you really want to see this deal fail?
Oh, but that's not how it would work, Mark. Let me tell you how the legislature works. If I had the deciding vote, they would have to come to me and say, Josh, what will it take to get your vote? How did Bernie Sanders and I, and yeah, you heard that correctly, how did Bernie Sanders and I get relief checks for working people 3 years ago in the COVID package? How did we do it? Because they needed our votes. And so we got relief checks for every single American because we insisted on it in order to get our votes. My leadership didn't want it. The White House didn't really want it, but they had to have it because they had to have our votes. If they needed my vote and were attentive to the concerns of the people of Missouri, we'd get some movement on trade. The sad fact
sounds
is
like you're
they don't
acknowledging
need
the
my
votes are
vote
there
to pass this, and that's lamentable. But that's a fact. That doesn't mean, though, I'm going to not work on it, Mark. I'm going to continue to work on this. I'm going to continue to push this forward. I'm going to try to force votes on China tariffs, on renewing our industry, bringing it back to this country until we can get something done for the working people of Missouri and nationwide.
Fair to say President Biden drove his debt ceiling deal right through the middle of Congress?
Was that? Mark, what was that last one?
Just for a bit of political analysis, is it fair to say President Biden drove this bus, the debt ceiling deal, right through the middle of Congress?
Well, I don't know. I'll leave that to you in terms of the punditry. I mean, I'm sure that you quoted Ann at the beginning, and I'm sure that House Republicans will say that, we got these various wins, and that's great, and Democrats will say we got these other wins. I mean, that's fine. I mean, I'll leave that to you to score it. My point is just that when it comes to what I think is the critical issue for our economy, jobs for working people, industry in America, I just don't think this deal gets even into the ballpark, and so I'm going to be a no.
Senator Hawley, thanks.
Hey, you bet.
All right, we are now, let's forget about that D.C. talk. Let's get a little closer to home. Missouri House Democrat Sarah Unsicker joins us now after the Missouri legislature wrapped up its session. But you have other news. The campaign season is upon us, and
yes,
you're running for Attorney General.
That's correct. Yes.
How can a Democrat win in Missouri?
Well, it's been a while since a Democrat has won statewide in Missouri, but we really need somebody who will run primarily to serve Missourians. It's not an office that should be political. The work of the Attorney General is the work of protecting Missourians and being the attorney for the state of Missouri, not campaign runs and political things like what's been going on for the last few years.
You just saw Senator Josh Hawley talking there. After him was Senator Eric Schmidt. Both of them were attorneys general. And
Right.
now we have Andrew Bailey, who Governor Parson appointed. Score them on that metric.
On the metric of running for the, or
Of
working
what
for
you
the
just said,
people
public
of Missouri.
service over political
Yeah,
gain.
I think all three of them have spent their careers as Attorney General working for their next campaign. They have not been working to serve the people of Missouri. There have been all kinds of frivolous lawsuits.
It is a political job.
It is a political job, but
The reason I ask that is just
Yeah.
on a political philosophy, I wonder your thinking on this. Isn't good policy also good politics?
no.
No.
Not necessarily. Bills that prevent health care measures in schools, for example, that is not good policy. We need to let organizations and places that have lots of kids set their policy to keep those kids and their families healthy.
You recently appeared at the Circuit Attorney's office in downtown St. Louis, where Governor Parson was appointing Gabe Gore. Any first remarks about Gabe Gore and the job he has in front of him, or the qualifications he brings into the job?
Yeah, I'm really excited to see him as the circuit attorney. He brings a lot of qualifications. He has a lot of experience, and he will know how to run that office. And I'm very excited to have him hiring staff back that have worked for the circuit attorney's office before, and have him in that position.
You made some interesting remarks in the press availability just after he was announced, and you said that I think I heard you correctly, that you supported the push from Andrew Bailey to push Kim Gardner from office, and that you might use similar powers to push other prosecutors from their posts.
I wouldn't necessarily use my power to push others from their posts unless they're not doing their job.
Well, there was a qualifier.
Before that, I would certainly work with prosecutors to help them get their job done. So, for example, I would want them to be prosecuting child abusers and not letting them plead to misdemeanors and then get firearms afterwards.
That
because
sounds like a
that's
specific
dangerous.
example you're raising.
Yes, that's related to the Agape boarding school.
And do you consider that issue now settled?
No.
They're
No.
closed. No?
They closed. Another school has opened in their place. I believe they're going to be running a camp this summer, for a horse camp.
And this is in Southwest Missouri for any of our viewers who may not know. It's quite a ways
Yes.
from here, but still an issue of very great importance to the state,
And
where there were allegations of vast child abuse happening for
that's child
institutional.
abuse, some labor trafficking allegations as well.
And so you think that prosecutor should have been pushed from their job as well?
I think he certainly should have done more to work for the kids at Agape and their families. So, but there's unlicensed residential schools all over the state, and we need to make sure that anybody who works with kids has some oversight to make sure those kids are safe.
So are you calling on Andrew Bailey to do that now?
I would love to see him do that now, yes.
How much credit does he get for his role in Kim Gardner's departure, in your eyes?
I don't know the situation well enough to know how much is from his quo warranto prosecution as opposed to other pushes. I think it was a collective effort, and I'm really glad to see that office moving forward now.
Republican Speaker Dean Plocker was one who said that it was the legislature that was threatening to basically override her, that's what really pushed her out, not the AG. I don't know how you see it. Yeah.
Again, I don't really know the full details, and I haven't spoke with Ms. Gardner, so I couldn't say what exactly it was that pushed her out.
And we're running low on time. I'd love to ask you, though, about the impact you think the abortion question on the ballot might have on other statewide races this year.
I think it's important to have the abortion question on the ballot and let Missouri voters express their views on whether abortion should be legal and in what circumstances. Right now, it's pretty much across the board not legal to have an abortion in Missouri.
All right, Missouri House Democrat Sarah Unsicker joining us, just recapping. We'd love to check back in with you throughout now in the primary and your race against Elad Gross and perhaps others. I don't know if maybe some other candidates may join the field.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us. Over across the border, Illinois Democrats just approved a $50.6 billion spending plan just before the Memorial Day weekend. Every Republican voted against that spending plan. Governor J.B. Pritzker said it now makes 5 straight years with a balanced budget.
Our record is clear. $10.5 billion of debt paid down, including $450 million in this budget alone to pay off old tobacco settlement bonds, provide additional pension payments, and another $90 million in this budget to further reduce accounts payable. Once at almost $16 billion, our overdue bills have been eliminated. Our empty rainy day fund is now on its way to more than $2 billion. GDP has grown to above $1 trillion, and we've received multiple credit upgrades from every ratings agency. Each of these accomplishments have set a solid foundation for responsible budget making.
Illinois Assistant Majority Leader Jay Hoffman joins us now from the House just across the river. Thanks for joining us. Good to have you with us.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
Comptroller Susana Mendoza, a Democrat, has said that the budget isn't really balanced if the state still has a big stack of overdue bills. That stack is now a lot shorter than it used to be. Some conservatives have said the budget isn't really balanced if there's still this big bloated unfunded pension liability out there. That bill isn't all going to come due at once, but they say it shows an imbalance. How do you grade the extent to which a budget is balanced?
Well, first of all, I don't think there's no doubt that this budget is balanced. Number one, when it comes to overdue bills under the Wagner administration, the previous Republican administration, where many of these conservatives loyally followed him, we had a $16 billion backlog in bills. Those bills are paid down. Now people who provide services to the state are being paid within 30 days. And that has a lot to do with some of the past budgets, and that'll happen, I believe, in this budget as well.
It sounds like you're saying the business operations of the state are going a lot more smoothly, and that certainly the facts show that's true. But to the larger picture, is there do legislators have that blind spot to say, oh, that's a long-term problem, we don't have to worry about that now?
Well, we have a payback plan for the pension system, which is going to go through 2045. Mm-hmm. We are following that plan. We actually paid $200 million additional than we had to under that plan. We have to pay our pension obligations. We're going to do it, but it's going to have happened over time.
Last year's budget was what, $47 billion? This one's $50 billion?
It's 50.6, I believe. Yeah.
How much of inflation just sort of swells that number a little bit?
Well, obviously, we're going to have a new contract with our unions, AFSCME unions, and others.
And that's not done yet. We don't know the cost of that yet.
Yeah, but I believe that we kind of have an idea where it's going to end up. But inflation does have an impact.
Feel free to break some news if you have any specifics.
Well, I don't have any specifics, but Mark, I'm sure you'll break it as soon as you know.
If I know it, I would tell you. Yeah, okay, so you're saying we could know the cost of that very soon. Lawmakers also, though, voted to give themselves another pay raise, up to $89,000 plus and some change there. Illinois lawmakers already have one of the highest public salaries of any legislators in the state. Is that really necessary?
Well, this is a cost of living increase, and because of the high amount of inflation, the cost of living increase was a little bit higher than it normally is. Me personally, I'm going to give my cost of living increase, I'm going to give it to charity, charity in the Metro East area.
Should other lawmakers follow suit, or just leave that to them?
That's up to them, and I think some lawmakers are full-time single mothers who work full-time as legislators, and they need the income.
You don't hear this very loudly, but if you listen to some lawmakers in that building, some of them will whisper to you, hey, there was a time when lawmakers were tempted with taking outside income or other things. And if you really raise the pay here, maybe you'd be less likely to go into some places you shouldn't go. Is that a winning argument, you think, with the public? Or?
Well, we're number one, you shouldn't do some
Shouldn't
of the
break the
actions.
law
You
anyways.
shouldn't break the law
Yeah.
anyways, regardless of whether you're full-time or part-time. Secondly, I do believe in a citizen legislature where we have farmers, we have teachers, we have doctors, we have attorneys, people who represent all swaths of Illinois, and I think that's very important to keep that.
One big budget hurdle really stood out. It drew a lot of attention and time, and that was this explosion in cost in health care for undocumented migrants in Illinois. What's driving that?
Well, I think number one, I think that the initial estimates were way low when it was passed, I believe, 2 years ago. And so healthcare costs have risen. On this issue, I believe there has to be controls. I was one of the leaders in making sure that we gave those controls to the governor, allowing him to cut back on some of the spending. But I believe that we have to also realize that whether you're an immigrant, whether you're undocumented, whether you're anybody who gets sick and has to go to the emergency room, if you go to an emergency room without any type of insurance, we're all going to pay for that. Yet, I believe that number one, it shouldn't be extended as far as increase the number of people who are eligible. But number two, the cost control measures that we gave to the governor, I think, are going to really rein in the costs that have been ballooning in that program.
Some of the healthcare and insurance adjustments the legislature made this session, I think, are a little wonky. They might get into the weeds a little, but can you boil it down to the people in our audience? What's the impact with the state-run health exchange and some of the changes to the insurance law? How would they notice it?
Well, first of all, when it comes to healthcare premiums, we're going to actually have the Department of Insurance is going to have robust authority to actually look at the premiums and the size of the premiums and make sure that they are actually reflective of actual costs.
And that the insurance company isn't gouging
the consumer or gouging the business or gouging whoever is paying the premium. In addition, having the state-run exchange, what that'll do is it'll put Illinois, number one, I believe it will reduce costs to individuals, but number two, if something were to happen on the national level, who knows, with regard to Obamacare, we would then have a state-run exchange to make sure that everyone who was on Obamacare in Illinois could remain on a similar program.
a lot of new members this session. How do you grade Speaker Welch, keeping everybody in line?
It's hard. You know, we had 78 Democrats, a historic number. I think he did a good job. And in my opinion, our diverse caucus has opinions, not only opinions all across the board, whether you're more moderate or more progressive or somewhere in between, or whether you're from Chicago or from where I'm from, right across the river in the Metro East. So there's regional diversity, there's ethnic diversity, and there's ideological diversity, and bringing all that together under one tent is very difficult, but we were able to do it.
We're going to pivot here for just a minute to some sad news that we just saw about the Illinois State House today. You might have seen, and I'm sort of catching you off guard with this, I didn't tell you before you sat down, about the sudden passing of Todd Meisch.
Yeah.
And we've seen some statements coming in. There he is. He worked for the Illinois Chamber of Commerce. The Illinois AFL-CIO just put out a statement a minute ago saying, and I'm paraphrasing, they were on different sides of the aisle, but they really respected his work there. Do you have any thoughts, memories you'd like to share about Todd?
Yeah, we were in so many negotiations together, whether it was unemployment insurance issues, workers' compensation issues. Todd knew how to represent the Chamber of Commerce in the state of Illinois. He did a good job. He did yeoman's work, and he's going to be missed.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, Jay Hoffman, thank you for joining us. Any preview about the upcoming 2024 presidential year and all of what's ahead?
Well, I'm for Biden. How's that?
Oh, shocker. All right, there you go. We'll see you right here at the same time next week. Until then, we're off the record.
Thanks, Mark.